Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Supercast, Leveraging Virtualization to Simplify Disaster Recovery Planning, sponsored by Arcserve and SolarWinds and presented by Redmond Magazine. I'm Tracy Cook, and I'd like to welcome everyone here today. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a couple of housekeeping details. We will have 3 presentations today. There will be a Q&A session after the final presentation. So please feel free to submit your questions into the Q&A box on the left side of your console at any time during the event. We'll get to as many questions as we can during the live event today. If you'd like to get a copy of any of the presentations, please click on the green file icon folder icon at the bottom center of your screen, and you'll have access to all the presentations. And finally, this event is being recorded and will be archived for future viewing, and you'll receive an email within the next 24 to 48 hours informing you when the replay is available. Now I'd like to kick off the event. Our keynote speaker and moderator today is Tim Warner. Tim is an IT professional, Microsoft MVP, and Pluralsight author based in Nashville. He's been involved in all forms of IT since 1997 and can be found on Twitter at TechTrainerTim. So, Tim, I'd like to pass the event over to you.
Thanks very much, Tracy, and thanks to all of you, our attendees, for joining us today. I hope that you're warm where you are in the world right now. For 20 minutes, I'm going to teach you some stuff about virtualization and disaster recovery planning. That's the long title of this presentation, but let's take a look at our specific bullet points. We have the trend toward server virtualization, just kind of to warm up our discussion. And then we'll consider disaster recovery strategies on premises and compare and contrast those with DR in the cloud. I often tell people that I work with, clients, etc., sometimes colleagues, that on-premises data center management is so very different from cloud-based, whether you're in the Azure cloud or AWS or Google Cloud, whatever it is. They're very different paradigms. And ultimately, what I hope to do is tee you up for Arcserve's and SolarWinds presentations. Will be taking over from me in, like I said, about 19 minutes now. So to begin with, let's start with the trend toward server virtualization. I'd like to show a couple pretty pictures here. Paradigm shift with server virtualization. It seems like almost any IT service is available as a service, isn't that right? I mean, server virtualization's been around for several years by now. You're probably, most or all of you, use it in your production environments. One of many paradigm shifts is moving from these racks and racks and racks of monolithic servers, maybe each server is managing a single service or a couple services, to a much more agile, and let's face it, less expensive platform where we can consolidate different servers and their workloads onto fewer hardware resources. I sum up some of the many benefits of this paradigm shift in the next slide, so let's proceed on to that one. Why does server virtualization make sense? And then we're going to get into the disaster recovery aspects. First of all, this is a captain obvious point, of course, but we're saving on hardware costs because there's fewer what's called CapEx or capital expenditure, upfront expenditure, fewer physical boxes. And then if we look at your server life cycle, I don't know if you own your machines outright or if you're on a 3-year, 2-year lease cycle, but you have TCO or total cost of ownership. Think of all that goes into maintaining a data center. That'd be a really fun discussion for us to have at another time maybe. The science of a good data center. Think of power management, temperature management, redundancy at every level to ward off failures. Nowadays, IT, as you know, is 24/7, 365. When I got into the industry in the mid-90s, I could pretty much count on coming into the office after 5 p.m. local time and nobody would be there, so I pretty much owned the network until the next morning. It's not like that today. And then, of course, we have all these SLA, service level agreements, that enforce compliance and could really result not just in monetary penalties for our businesses, but also in, the flat earth of the internet. Your reputation can suffer from something like a service outage. More granularly, virtualization makes sense now in 2017 because we have vendors giving increased focus on security. For instance, think of Microsoft and their Windows Server 2016 product. The latest and greatest version of Windows Server offers a Hyper-V feature called shielded VMs. And essentially what you're doing is encrypting your VMs to protect them against the server administrators, not the VM administrators, but the actual hardware host administrators. It's a good idea, I think. And then how does this start to move into a disaster recovery context? Virtualization is nice because it offers us portability, doesn't it? Hyper-V, for instance, in the Microsoft world has had live migration for a long time. So without too much muss, fuss, or greasy aftertaste, you can take a running virtual machine and shift it to, say, another host in your failover cluster, or potentially move or copy the VHD to another physical site on-prem, or increasingly now up into the cloud. Now, of course, these VHDs probably weigh in at many, many gigabytes, so there's the issue of your internet bandwidth, but that's another discussion for another time. Now, who are the market leaders in server virtualization? This actually plays more than you might think initially into our discussion of disaster recovery. I'll get into that in just a second. I've mentioned Microsoft's Hyper-V hypervisor several times. They've been in the game for a long time. Hyper-V is available in Windows Server and Windows Client. I put an exclamation mark here because many people are surprised to hear that all editions of Windows 10 include client-side Hyper-V. They think, why in the world would I need that? It's actually intended for developers who want a more agile platform to set up VMs on their workstations. But it's available, and you could potentially set up a Hyper-V server VM on your Windows client machine and push it into your server infrastructure. Again, no problem. In the public cloud space, of course, Azure is Microsoft's public cloud offering, and they use Hyper-V under the hood in all of their data centers. So even if you're running a Linux virtual machine in Azure, it's still under the hood running on a hardware host that runs some kind of appliance version of Windows and uses the Hyper-V hypervisor. Next, we have VMware, also a market leader hypervisor. They have their desktop workstation software. In the enterprise space, they have the ESXi hypervisor and their entire vSphere management platform. And more in the last, 6 months or so, VMware has partnered with Amazon and AWS to meet the need for hybrid cloud. AWS historically hasn't been very strong in the hybrid cloud scenario, and VMware has had their VMware Cloud offering, so that's the direction they're going. And then we have over here Xen, which is an open source, free and open source software hypervisor. There is Citrix that has a commercial version, and again, a management platform called Xen Server. And a little known fact, perhaps, is that Amazon Web Service and their data centers, those server machines are running Xen for their hypervisor platform. Now, why does this matter? Well, if your business is heavily invested in one or the other hypervisor, then that's something to consider. In other words, does the disaster recovery solution that you're planning to purchase and buy into fully support virtualization workloads in any or all of these, or maybe one that's not even on this slide? These are just the big fish, so to speak. Now let's take a brief look at disaster recovery on-prem and then compare it with the challenges of doing the same thing in a cloud, public cloud, or hybrid cloud environment. First, I wanted to get just 4 quick vocab terms. This will be as painless as possible, I promise, because these terms come up in discussion so much. Recovery point objective, or RPO, is a metric that's often quantified in your service level agreement contracts that's related to how frequently you're taking backups. And the question that you answer when you're designing your RPO objective is how much data can you stand to lose, expressed maybe not in data storage, but as a time interval after an incident happens before resuming services. How much data can you stand to lose and still maintain compliance and not declare an outright catastrophe? A related metric in DR is the recovery time objective, or RTO. This is a broader metric than the RPO, and here is where we're defining how much time you have per your SLA agreements between a catastrophe and a resumption of service. These are more than mere vocab words. You may already be living this right now, and you feel the weight as a systems administrator, as a IT manager, in keeping your services available. Related are failover and failback. Failover simply refers to either an automatic or manual shift from a primary system to a secondary system in the event that the primary system has a catastrophic failure. And again, this could open up all sorts of side discussions about from the power supplies of your servers in your on-premises data centers to the hardware hosts. The main term that comes into my mind instantly when I think of failover and high availability is your layers of redundancy, such that you do have a secondary system in place. Failback is the mirror image of failover. This is where we restore operation of the primary system after we fixed the problem. I mean, we could theoretically stay with secondary, but that in general is not how it's done. I wanted to give just a nod towards, well, what exactly are we concerned with in terms of the data? We've talked about some of the vocab terms and some of the trends in server virtualization, but what is the actual money, so to speak? And I've divided it like this. Tell me if this makes sense in the light of your experience. You have your line of business workload. I don't know what your business does, but I can almost guarantee you have data that you do not want to lose under any circumstances. Those workloads are perhaps running exclusively or in part on virtual machines. So the VHD, the virtual hard disks that make up the VMs, their configuration, you'll want to back that up. Certainly databases, they may be running in what's called an IaaS scenario inside of VMs, or you could have separate database servers. On premises, it's probably the latter. You have your application and user data on premises. Your users probably have their home folders stored on network servers in your data centers. How does this factor in when we're moving to the cloud? Well, first, not so fast, Tim. There's the hardware hosts. In an on-premises virtualized environment, the failure of a hardware host could be extremely catastrophic because it's not just that server that's going to be unavailable, it's going to be all VMs that it's hosting. That's a very scary thought indeed, and brings up the importance of redundancy and the high cost of maintaining that redundancy yourself in your own data centers. Network subsystem is another thing. How are your users, your customers, internal to the organization, your business partners, your external customers communicating with your line of business services? The network fabric. Think of your on-premises switches, routers, your firewalls. Do you have redundancy at those layers such that the failure of an edge router won't bring down connectivity into your environment? Do you have various and sundry methods for high availability? And then, assuming you do have an on-premises backup solution in place, what are you doing with the backup archives? When I got into IT in the mid-90s, on-premises storage was used far too often. I'd like to think that that tide has shifted in 2017. But when you think about how nonsensical it is to store your backup archives in or near your data center, I mean, if you lose the data center, you're going to lose your backup archives right off. So off-site storage. For a while, it was de rigueur to hire a company like Iron Mountain who will physically come in and take your backup tapes and store them in some disaster-proof vault somewhere. That can be expensive and tedious to do. And there's also horsing around with the physical media, which is never fun. Of course, now we have a trend towards the cloud and how much easier it is to back up your data and workloads from your on-premises data center, maybe to a disaster recovery data center, but more likely directly into your public cloud storage account. That opens up another subset of discussions that relate to how well do you trust your cloud provider? Is your cloud provider certified with your compliance requirements like FIPS or HIPAA or FedRAMP if you're a government contractor here in the States? These are important questions when choosing not only a disaster recovery provider, but also a public cloud provider. Sometimes they're one and the same, but not always. I'm feeding you a lot of info here in a short amount of time. I just realized that. Please note that you have these assets downloadable, as Tracy said at the beginning of this session, and this also is recorded, so you'll be able to study it and even fast forward and scrub to the parts that you really need to review. This simple diagram sums up some options, some things to consider in closing, just staying on premises before we switch over to the cloud. I meant this to animate, so just imagine it's animating, where we have at the center your core workloads. I just put VMs there essentially as a placeholder. And your on-site backup, I'm moving clockwise from top to 3 o'clock position, off-site backup, physical DR site, and then just out of the random files, governance, which is important. I mean, the whole issue of disaster recovery is not just the tech stuff, the RPO and RTO and all those metrics, but it's also stuff like contact lists and decision trees, your business continuity documentation. Who's on first, as the old comedy duo Abbott and Costello used to say. I age myself with those kind of comments, I realize. That's perfectly okay, though. All right, the last leg of my presentation deals with DR and the public cloud. So let's wrap up everything that I've taught you over the last 15 minutes and apply it to 21st century IT. And I think key to that discussion is reminding ourselves of the shared responsibility model of cloud computing. And it really is global. I don't care if you're talking about DR or security or whatever. The cloud vendor is going to provide for the security and environment high availability of the cloud. But the customer, you, is responsible for providing the security in your cloud tenant or within your cloud subscription. And that makes sense. I mean, it makes sense for many reasons to consider using a public cloud service as say, a secondary DR site, because you're not paying for space in a data center, number one. You're not paying a separate internet connection, number two. I mean, we could just go on from there. But as long as you're comfortable with the public cloud provider and you have a fairly nice internet connection, you can replicate not just your user data and your line of business data, but your entire VM environments to the cloud, and then restore them in the cloud or back to on-premises or wherever, whatever you need to do in that regard. It's just incredible savings. I shake my head in amazement still at how much easier DR has gotten. Now, I say easier in terms of just the cost and complexity, but this is still super important stuff to think about. And it can get complex really fast because there's the whole learning curve of the public cloud, and then taking some of what you know with on-premises DR and then basically shelving a lot of it to understand the cloud paradigm. And let's look at this slide. Options for cloud-based disaster recovery. Again, you have your VMs. Let's just use those as a representative example of the core of your DR strategy. In the 12 o'clock position, replicated storage. Can you imagine how expensive it would be for you to set up additional sites? Maybe not just for DR, but also just to put your applications and services closer to your users. You probably have a customer base that goes beyond your state or your country. Azure, AWS, these big cloud providers, their clouds stretch all around the world. They have a huge network of data centers. And it's with a couple lines of code or a couple of clicks of a button in a web portal, you can put your data literally wherever you want in the world. Of course, that brings up data sovereignty and it brings up compliance and all that stuff too. But it's just so much easier to spread your data out and, again, build that high availability and redundancy that we mentioned earlier. In the 3 o'clock position of this diagram for your line of business databases, replicating those. Your physical DR site, you may be able to set up a hot standby site entirely in the cloud, as I said before. All right, and then in closing, last couple of slides here, cloud-based DR can, and I just will go ahead and say it, is complex. I don't mean to minimize that. This is a representative diagram from the Azure documentation, and it's just crazy, an active and passive data center all in the cloud. There's no hand-holding with AWS and Azure. Services like Rackspace will help you architect and carry your solution through, but you're pretty much on your own unless you're paying for support. with most public clouds. You've got VPNs and clustering and replication and data storage. And that part is your responsibility of the shared responsibility model. Very briefly, Netflix has a open source software product called Chaos Monkey that's really cool. They actually will randomly terminate instances of their production servers in the AWS cloud. And in doing so, they're able to get greater confidence in their solution's resilience. Kind of a brave approach, but it guarantees their high availability. And you can read more about this at this URL. All right, let's see here. Suggestions in closing. I'm going to buzz through this because my time is just about out. Certifying regulatory compliance requirements. Studying your data sovereignty. I just mentioned those in passing, but I wanted to make sure to get them on a slide. The whole issue of proactivity, performing trial data restores, planned failovers, and don't be afraid to ask for help. As a matter of fact, that's why I believe you're here at this webinar. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. If you want to contact me or engage me directly, that's perfectly cool. My Twitter handle is TechTrainerTim, and my work email address is tim-warner@pluralsight.com. So let me advance the slide. Clicky, clicky here. And I'm going to, whoops, went a little bit too far. There we go. This is where I want to be. Our next speaker for you is Stacey Budd from Arcserve. Stacey's worked with Arcserve Solutions since 2007. He joined the company as a pre-sales consultant in 2014. Prior to that, Stacey served in the U.S. Air Force as a nuclear weapons specialist. Wow. When he isn't educating the world about Arcserve Unified Data Protection, you can often find him fishing, kayaking, or both in the warm Florida sun. Now, doesn't that sound nice with all this snowstorm business? Stacey, it's all you. Take it away.
No kayaking today, however. The weather is not as bad as it is in the rest of the world, but still not kayaking weather. So glad to meet everybody here today. We're going to obviously talk about the Arcserve solution, Arcserve Unified Data Protection, but great points there, Tim, on some key things like RPO and RTO. And all too often when I talk to customers, one of the steps that they have not taken is really understanding where they need to be, what the value of their data is, right? And that will govern what RPO that they need to have or what RTO they need to accomplish, right? So the first steps is always understanding the value of your data and going that far. We're going to go ahead and start a little bit by talking about Arcserve as a company. We've been around, the Arcserve product's been around for 20 plus years. A lot of people are familiar with the name. They're not always familiar with the Unified Data Protection product, right, which is a newer approach on what we do. Instead of file-based approach, it is an image-based approach, and we'll get to that in a few minutes here. A few years ago, we did spin out and became an independent company, which has been a fantastic ride from this side of things. We're focused 100% on what we do, right, which is backup and disaster recovery, coming from on-prem, solutions, backing up local, taking that data, moving it up to cloud if you want to do that, moving it to a DR site if you need to do that, working with virtualized environments, physical environments, Windows, Linux, right, and bringing that to a simplified kind of focus for everybody. During this time, we've been, of course, recognized in the industry. We're recognized at VMworld, right? We got their gold awards. We got 3 gold awards at the VMworld that I went to, right? For that we protect both physical and virtual environments. So it was definitely a great award there to receive when we were there. It was fantastic. When we look at, I spoke a little bit about this, right, that what we do, right, with the Unified Data Protection product, right? People have known of Arcserve Backup, and everything like that, which was a file-based product. Unified Data Protection, fast forwards us into modern day kind of backup and disaster recovery techniques, right, image-based and things like that as well to help simplify that as well. Our goal, is to provide, a unified experience from the beginning to end, right? So no matter what you're protecting, right, make that as simple and straightforward as possible while bringing enterprise class features, down to small, medium business companies as well. We do this kind of in an approach which is, a good, better, best approach, right? In some cases, we may be leveraging software-only solutions, hardware solutions, and in some cases, cloud solutions. So it really comes back to better understanding customers' environments, understanding their RPOs, their RTOs, what are they going to need as far as that goes, and then we can pretty much dial the product into where they need it to be, again, with that good, better, best kind of approach. When we look at the Unified Data Protection product specifically, right, it provides a seamless way to protect in managed environments with a single server or potentially thousands of Windows and Linux nodes. Right, so I can literally talk to a small business and talk to somebody on the top end of medium business, and I can still be talking about the same product, right, and be talking about the same features and all of that as well. So it really dials in nicely with what their needs are going to be. We have a unified management console. We can protect and manage, recover physical, virtual environments. We collect data with fast image level snapshot, right, allowing for granular restore capability, right, so we're restoring individual files and folders even though we're taking this snapshot, right. We still give the ability to do application data recovery, right, so we can still recover applications such as, Exchange and get down into a file granular, not file, but an Exchange granular level restore for those cases too. And then if somebody has their Exchange, for instance, up in like Office 365, we could back that up as well. So, we definitely are changing with the technology that's out there. A lot of people are going to, Exchange in the cloud, and we definitely support that as well. Under this management console, we also provide the ability to replicate recovery points, right, to alternate locations. Those alternate locations could be, in the cloud. It could be a DR location. It could be an MSP location, right? So we give that flexibility in order to do that. And we do that right within this product. So it's not like an add-on product. It's not a different console or anything like that as well. With the way that we handle deduplication, right, source-side global deduplication, we will take and we'll limit the bandwidth requirements in order to send that data across the wire to that cloud location, for instance, right? So we can definitely do that, very aggressively, reduce bandwidth requirements, make it more likely and more capable to do things like send your data off-site a lot easier, right? Once it's in that remote location, right, we can, provide capabilities like virtual standby, which I'll talk about in a moment, which is a DR capability as well as instant virtual machines. We can do this in the cloud, in DR locations, so a lot of possibility on what you can do once your data is in that other location. The unified architecture of the Arcserve family allows full integration with additional functions such as high availability. I'm not really going to cover high availability too much, but when you do need to fail over, fail back, have continuous protection, we can do that as well. So not only just backup, right, but we can also turn around and do high availability as well within the product. We can still archive out to tape, right? So we still support that if customers need that. I still run into some legal offices, hospitals, medical, like that. Sometimes they don't want to go to cloud for some reason. Federal sometimes doesn't want to go out to cloud, or they won't, there's certain things that they won't send to cloud. So we still offer solutions, either replicating to another location and then taking that to an offline media, right, which could be tape, for instance, or something like that as well. So a lot of different ways that we can kind of support that all within the product there as well. One kind of thing that I really wanted to take a moment and focus on was backup strategy. Okay, and we talk about RPO, and Tim talked about RPO, recovery point objective. And, as I go through, one of the things I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about a couple use cases from customers, right, that have given us, some examples of how, Arcserve's helped them, right, in the past. So I'm going to kind of end on those, but it's all going to come back to, changing kind of an approach of your backup. Right, so if you look at a traditional file-based approach, which is what you see on the left, right, you tend to do a full backup. You do incrementals or differentials, right, between the week, and then at the end of the week you do another full backup. And that full backup is what we see customers struggle with. I've seen customers, unfortunately, they may have a 4-day backup window, meaning that they do 4 days of incrementals, and then they trigger their full backup because it may span 3 days, right? So that means if they have a data loss in that time frame, they're not going to be able to go back to every single day within there, right? So that comes back to understanding the value of your data, what you can afford to recover from, when you can afford to recover. If you look at using a technology like our I2 technology, right, infinite incrementals, where you can take the full backups out of that rotation. So what you do is you start with a full, you build your incrementals on top, you set a retention for your daily, weekly, monthlies, maybe even backups throughout the day. Maybe as frequent as every 15 minutes, depending on your data change, right? So you really can go in and set when you want to do those backups. And then what we'll do, right, what we'll do is we'll manage that full in the back end. We'll merge it into the oldest incremental as part of a merge process that doesn't affect the client servers typically, right? It's happening at the backup server instead. What we call the recovery point server is actually handling that. Infinite incrementals also directly address storage needs, right? So as you're not backing up those fulls, you're no longer having to write that data to disk either, right? So it's saving you on that as well. Where I really see the biggest benefit, though, right, is going to be from time to do the backup, right? We can schedule, only incremental backups, incremental snapshots, take advantage of technology within the virtualization vendors and their change block tracking drivers that they have in place. So we're only backing up, the change blocks, and then that we're taking and what we're writing to disk with deduplication is only the unique blocks out of those change blocks globally across backups, across servers, so that we can further reduce the bandwidth requirements as far as that as well. So for every customer that I ever talk to about our product, I'm always talking to them about, changing their approach, right? First step I'm having is, what is your backup policy that you're doing today? And then let me talk to you about, implementing infinite incrementals. It'll make your life a lot better. I would like to see customers back up multiple times a day. Of course, you have to look at what kind of impact that you have there. But if you back up multiple times a day, even if you just back up twice a day and you're backing up once a day, you just doubled your RPO, right? So now instead of going back a day, maybe and losing a day's worth of data, at worst case scenario, now you're looking at losing 12 hours worth of data, right? Or if you can even go a little further and so forth. So understanding the value of that data and really kind of what you can afford is going to govern when you're going to set that backup policy. Now, when we talk about, backup, and that's all great, right? But really, it's the least important thing, right? The ability to recover the data is the most important part of that, right? So being able to quickly recover your data, how long is it going to take to recover that data? And then, is the data even be recoverable? Another thing that I speak to customers a lot about, and I've been doing this a long time, right? And I've heard, unfortunately, some horror stories in those years. I had a customer that was backing up to tape, and what he did was every day, he ran his backup. It ejected the tape when it was done, and then he was taking and he was putting the same tape right back into the drive and was writing right over that tape in a tape scenario, right? So he thought he had a year's worth of backups, right? And then unfortunately, he had a day's worth because every time he was reformatting the tape, he was writing over it, and that came from an educational problem, right? He didn't really understand the product, and he didn't really understand, the concept of backup and all that as well. He's doing the best he could in that case. Unfortunately, it was not a good result in this case, right? He only had a day's worth of backups in that case. And I've heard of other things too. And a lot of times when we think of disasters too, I'll throw this out now, is I'm from Florida. I think of disasters. I think of, hurricanes. I lived in Kansas for a while. I think of tornadoes. I've never been out west, but you think of earthquakes, different things like that, floods. Those are disasters, but those are also, when you look at it, those are probably the least common disasters. I would say, rolling brownouts probably a little bit more, common, or, power issues, or somebody's walking through a data center and they trip over a cord. I worked at a company, we used to give tours to little kids, right, and children. And when we would do that, you're always, when you're in the data center, you're keeping an eye on every kid as best as you can, because, you know what, children are children. I have a 3-year-old, right, and he's inevitably going to go up and push the button or do something that really he shouldn't be doing, right? So, those, when I think of disasters, of course we always think of the natural disasters, but really those all qualify as well, right? So being able to quickly get back your data, that's what we're going to talk about now. So we're going to go ahead and kind of approach that. We're going to talk about, the different ways that, that Arcserve Unified Data Protection, UDP, has in order to quickly recover that data. And the first one is, being able to, protect that environment, right? So we're going to start out by talking a little bit about protecting virtualized environments, and then we'll talk about the features, to quickly bring those back. Customers that have a large number of virtualized machines, a lot of times they'll prefer to collect backups without the performance impact of an agent, right? So being able to do an agentless backup, we do support agentless backup of VMware and Hyper-V in order to do that. What we see the two most common, virtualization vendors out there. Also, UDP is capable of collecting VMware and Hyper-V guests agentlessly, right? We can automatically discover the VMs on the target hypervisor, right? We can create protection plans for them, right? We can easily recover data from file level, right, through bare metal recovery in the same manner as our normal UDP recovery points that we do. We offer the ability to restore not only an entire VM, but also granular restore files and folders, right? So that's key. Being able to restore the entire VM is nice, and it's usually quick, right? But being able to go and from that agentless backup, still be able to do a granular restore, right? We can still back up things like Active Directory, Exchange, SQL, things like that as well too. And then with our global deduplication, which is an inline process, and what that means is it's happening in memory. It's not, you're not setting aside storage to do this deduplication, right? We provide a better storage and network utilization as well, right? We're not going to write as much data to disk. We're not going to be sending as much data across the network. Backup to disk is the primary target with UDP. Okay, we do give you the capability to copy to tape, copy to offline disk or different types of disk media there as well, replicate to offsite locations, and I talked a little about this cloud being supported as well and those kind of things. Now, I mentioned VMware and I've mentioned Hyper-V, and a lot of you might be saying, well, I run KVM, I run Zen, does that mean there's no hope for me, right, at least with our product? Absolutely not. Right? We can't do the agentless backup, but we can perform an agent-based backup. So we can still protect that environment, right? And we can still give you all the same capabilities that I'm going to talk about here in a moment. So we can still give you the file level restore, the application level restore, those kind of things, Active Directory. We're still going to give you all of that kind of support there as well. One of the big things that we do, and coming back to the recovery process that I was talking to you about, is give you the capability to, perform what we call virtual standby. And virtual standby is where we take that backup and we convert that into a virtual machine. So we back it up and then we convert it into a virtual machine. Now, if you put replication task in there first, that task of virtual standby could be at the local site or at the remote site. So in the case of, you do have a DR location, right, and you want to be able to spin that up, you can definitely do that at the DR location. So if you are in one city and you have rolling brownouts in that city, power issues, things like that, okay, not a problem. You can spin it up on the other side. Back if you know this is happening, right, you can plan for that as well. So if a source machine fails, you can choose to restore the machine to the last backup point of any type. This is why backing up more frequently, right, with infinite incrementals really comes to play, right? Because now when you recover, you're not going to be recovering, from as far back, right, and be working from as far back. Those backups could have been a full backup. They could have been an incremental backup. It really doesn't matter. We'll treat them like it's a full backup no matter what. It does provide extremely fast availability, right, of the virtual standby copy. That virtual standby, there'll be a proxy somewhere that's monitoring the source machine, and that failover can be automatic or it can be manual. You can even manage it through your hypervisor, Hyper-V and VMware being the key hypervisors here. So you can take, and the source machine could be on VMware, and your DR location could be running Hyper-V. So we could also do cross hypervisor as well as far as that goes. And then also being able to not only be able to bring that up, right, but then also once you're ready to go back, to be able to back that up and then do a restore on the other side, right, being able to do that. That's always going to be a very important step there as well, so keep that in mind. I've also seen customers that choose to use this tool as a P2V conversion. They're going to a virtualized solution. They back up their machine. They use virtual standby. They turn off the source machine, and they turn on the standby machine, and they're good to go. Right, so, and in fact, I get that question quite frequently, whether or not, hey, can we use this as a P2V kind of tool? And absolutely, right, so we can do that as well. But we're not just talking about virtual standby in DR locations. Not everybody has a DR location. So what we can do also is we can support going out and replicating that data to an EC2 instance in Amazon, right, and being able to perform that virtual standby up in EC2, right, or even on Arcserve. We have our own branded cloud, which I'm kind of remiss by not putting it on here, but we have our own branded cloud as well. So go to the Arcserve cloud, be able to perform virtual standby up there. Go to Amazon EC2, be able to perform virtual standby up there. Maybe you don't need the capabilities to do virtual standby, but you want to send your data to the cloud, then we support being able to go to S3 storage like that as well. So then you don't need to go to an EC2 instance up in Amazon. So different capabilities, but we absolutely do give you the ability to do that standby up in Amazon if you need to do that as well. Right, so we do support that. And a new kind of task that has been presented to me recently by a customer, they actually have an Amazon instance, and they want to back up to another Amazon location and be able to do that as well. Right, so no reason why we can't do that too. So a lot of capabilities. This virtual standby is unique to Windows, right, when we're talking about in Amazon. Right, being able to perform that virtual standby. Now we do have another capability called Instant Virtual Machine, and Instant Virtual Machine very similar to virtual standby. What Instant Virtual Machine does is we never actually create the virtual machine. What we do with this is we actually leverage emulation so that we will emulate that the virtual machine that the backup is a virtual machine. So we'll give you that capability. You lose some performance, but you gain, the ability that you don't have to set aside storage. You can go to, it's not such a hard line and, recovery point you're coming from. You can come to from any of them that you want as long as you've backed up the entire machine, right? So it gives you that capability in order to do that, right? when we talk about, instant virtual machine, right? Instant virtual machine, a lot of times, and you'll see this in a few minutes, we've had customers that use this, to recover and save themselves from things like ransomware and stuff like that as well. So not only, we're going to do this from whether the client machine is physical, whether it's virtual, and whether it's Hyper-V, VMware, whether the host that you're spinning up and presenting it to, is another hypervisor, being VMware Hyper-V or Hyper-V cross, kind of platform there as well. So we can do those too. The other one that's really, really cool, it's a Linux-only feature. It's instant bare metal recovery. And with instant bare metal recovery, what we do is we will go ahead and fetch the data, right? So we'll go ahead and fetch the data and start restoring it. So you'll boot up the source machine, the virtual machine in this case. We're talking about virtualization. It could be physical, right? But we're going to boot that up with live CD, watch the IP, watch for the machine name to come online. Once we see that, right, we'll start pushing out the backup to it and re-imaging that machine automatically. So it gives you the ability to do a remote bare metal restore. Now, a user goes to access that machine and it's not fully restored, we fetch the data and we go ahead and put the data on that machine as users go to fetch it. So it gives faster access to data, right? So you don't have to wait for the entire machine to be restored before users can use it. It does have to get to a point, but it's going to give you a lot less downtime. So again, we're with features like virtual standby, instant VM, instant bare metal recovery, we're directly affecting the time to recover, right, and getting you the ability to get that data much quicker as far as that goes, and get to your machines in the case of DR capabilities, right? Now, this instant BMR is a Linux-only feature. I hope to see that come over to Windows. It's the only feature that we have that's not cross-platform as far as that goes. When we look at, just like with virtual standby, right, there's also a cloud story with this as well. So not only, can we do, virtual standby in the cloud on the Windows side, but then on the Linux side, we can do instant VM up in EC2. In the Arcserve cloud, we could do instant VM on Windows or Linux. But, in the Amazon presence, definitely, in the EC2 instance for Linux, we could do instant VM or, instant BMR up there as well, give you those capabilities. And these features are coming to Azure as well, right? So we'll soon be able to be able to support that not only on Amazon but also in Azure, what we see as the two major clouds. And if this instead were a MSP, right? Well, then they would present out their storage as a cloud destination, and we'd be able to support that most likely, right? We'd have to look at what they're running as far as that goes, but there's no reason why we can't do that as well. So giving you that capability to quickly restore, and bring up those machines. Instant VM, to give you a little perspective of how Instant VM works, I demo it almost every demo that I do, and I do 3 to 4 demos a day, it seems like. And it takes me roughly 4 minutes to go through the process, explain it, and then bring up that machine. And as you can imagine, explaining it probably is the longest piece to that, right? So I can bring up a machine quite quickly and be able to do that. And now being able to do that up in the cloud as well is going to be fantastic. So up in Amazon EC2, it's great. No backup is worth its weight in gold. Another thing I always tell customers is never trust a backup. Always verify, verify, verify. I don't care what vendor you're talking about. If your role is to be able to restore data, right, you don't want to, at the time of restore, be able to find out that, that it didn't work, right, or that something happened, or that you've been switching out that same tape, right, for a year now. Right. So I am always talking to folks about make sure that you have a recovery process in place. You've documented. You test it. If not weekly, monthly. Right. But you're at least documenting it, testing it, and all that as well. The assured recovery feature within UDP automates that process for you. So it takes, if you will, that process that we just talked about, which was instant VM, and it takes and automates that in the background. You can write custom scripts to run against that data, right? So you're not just seeing a login screen, you're actually making sure certain things like services start, things like that. And then once that is done, it brings it back down. You get a pass-fail and those kind of things as well, right? And this would run across both Linux, Windows, physical, virtual, it wouldn't matter, right, as far as that goes. So the recoverability of your data is the most important process, the thing that you have to be aware of, and we have a process that can automate that test for you. Right, so just kind of in summary here, right, when we look at virtual standby and instant VM, right, to EC2, it's cost effective, right? That's why people want to do that, right? It does give you the ability to not have to have that alternate location, right, that DR location, right? It also gives you the ability to shift, right, from an on-prem, to a cloud location there as well. It does give you the ability to do that conversion of those recovery points, right? So that's definitely important there as well. On the Windows side, we'd use the virtual standby, and then, we're going to give you, and I'm going to recommend that you do backups frequently, right, as frequently as you can afford with that. And because we're doing things, leveraging the storage APIs, things like that, right, we're going to put less strain on servers to back them up. We're also going to be, if we back them up more frequently, we're backing up less data as well. We also take other processes out of there to make it even less impactful, right, so we can definitely do that as well. And then with that, what we call the recovery point server, that remote server, right, it's absolutely optimized, right, for that deduplication processes and things like that. So we're sending less data across the wire so that you can actually make this more, achievable, right? Even if you have large amounts of data, it really depends on your change rate, things like that as well. So I'm going to kind of wrap it up here with a few case studies. Right, I'm going to kind of probably talk in depth probably about this one, which is Compass Health, which in this case, we were able to help them not only from a recovery perspective, but just in this particular person's, day-to-day life, managing backups and those kind of things. So, I'm going to keep it brief and on point as much as possible, right? I'm only going to go through parts of this case study, but it is available on our website, arcserve.com. So please, if you're interested in it, go out there. There's a lot of other case studies out there as well as white papers, trial downloads, things like that as well. If you're familiar with healthcare, right, it's usually governed by HIPAA, right? You usually have a lot of concerns around data, the way it's managed, the way it's accessed, and all of that as well. So in this case, we're talking about Compass Health, which is managing several different, if you will, like doctor's offices, things like that as well. Their challenge was, not unlike a lot of customers that I run into, right? A lot of different solutions were in place, right? A lot of different IT administrators were in place as well from different providers, right? Everybody had their own input, right? And it goes on, right? But I think you get the idea, right? To put my own spin on it, to be honest with you, it was a cluster, right? A lot of different solutions in place, a lot of different people, hands in the pot. Everybody have their own ideas on the way this should be, and in this case, if you look at the quote from Carl Siebold, the director of IT here, right? Managing backups was adding about 8 to 10 hours a week to his workload. Now, if you think about it, right, a lot of times people don't have a dedicated person to manage their backups, right? So 8 to 10 hours a week is way too long, right, in order to be able to do that. 12 hours to restore machines, right? And he wanted, and I'd say he needed, right, something that if a building burned down, he'd be able to bring back the entire building in another office, right, within hours, right? That was his big challenge, right, is being able to do that as well. When we take a look, right, and the solution that we were able to provide him, right, by going to Unified Data Protection, it freed up a significant amount of his time, right? Faster backups, faster resource, faster disaster recovery. Look at that deduplication ratio, right? Insane deduplication ratio. We went from 18 terabytes down to 5.4 terabytes of data going on their appliance. Simplified the disaster recovery testing, gave him the confidence, right, in his ability to fully recover virtual servers should a disaster strike, right? Now he's spending 10 to 15% of his time managing backups, right? So definitely, you guys can read the quote there, but definitely made it a lot easier for him to manage, right? Freed up his time, gave him a solution, freed up the storage requirements that he needed, all of that as well. And I've talked to Carl before, so he's a really happy camper when it comes to our solution. He's happy to get on and talk to people about how it's saved him, right, in time and all that as well. So the next two case studies are really kind of directed towards, ransomware in this case. And obviously, in these customers, they're running virtualized environments, right? But, supporting, this is a publishing company supporting, hundreds of users, ransomware hit, and in this case, right, it came in via an attachment, right, a picture that somebody clicked on, right, or something like that. So, in this case, being able to recover quickly, right, and in this case, he had just performed the backup at 7 a.m. because he's running frequent backups, and he was able to spin up using instant virtual machine or virtual standby, I forget which, but he was able to do a quick recovery and get back online and, and not miss a beat, and pretty much, I think he got hit at like 8 a.m. and he had done a backup at 7 a.m. So, he's able to pretty much thumb his nose at the people with that sent him the ransom and just say, I'll just recover, right, as far as that goes. So and that's always, to me, that's always the best story, right, is when you don't have to pay that. If it's depending on the company, right, healthcare in this case, right, a lot of healthcare will pay those ransoms because, they make it fine $10,000 for each record that they can't pull up within that time frame, right? So a lot of times the ransom is less than what a fine would be. So in the case of if somebody requested data or something like that. So, anytime you can come in and kind of provide quick recovery like that, it's really gonna help out. There's a multitude of ways that this stuff gets in, right? We're not here today to talk about ransomware, but hopefully I'm showing you with features like virtual standby, instant virtual machine. We didn't really talk about it, but the full system high availability, which is continuous replication of data, all those are ways that you can combat, the impact that those kind of things can have on you, right? So definitely, and it's not always ransomware, right? Again, somebody trips over a cord or something like that as well. So, having that, that SLA in place, understanding the value of your data, how frequently do I need to do my backups, how long can it afford to take to do that recovery, does my data need to be offline, should I be sending data offsite as well? You should be, right? Do I have an offsite location? No, I don't. Maybe I do want to leverage cloud. All of those kind of things and being able to do, DR in the cloud if you need to do that, or do you just want it to be a final repository to send your data as well? Those are all key important factors, and I hope that I showed you today, where Arcserve can help you out with that. But, if in the case that, you want more information of that, please feel free, to reach out to us. Submit your questions here. Absolutely. I'll still be on the line to answer those as well. But then, feel free to take a look at arcserve.com, download trial software, reach out to us for demos, those kind of things too. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Eric.
Actually, I'll take over from you, Stacey.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Up
Thank
next
you.
is Eric Harless. He's the Senior Product Manager at SolarWinds MSP. Eric's responsible for the strategic direction and product definition of the MSP backup and recovery product line. He has over 20 years of industry experience in product management, marketing, system engineering, sales, and customer support. Prior to joining SolarWinds, Eric held several senior-level product management roles at several data protection and disaster recovery vendors, including Falcon Store Software, Symantec, CA Technologies, Commvault Systems, and more. That's a lot. Eric, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Stacey. So, you guys have laid down a excellent foundation for me. There's clearly a lot of choices out there when it comes to backup and recovery, business continuity, disaster recovery, physical recovery, virtualization. So I'm going to take my time to try to build upon what we've learned so far and outline where, some of those differentiators that SolarWinds MSP delivers with our backup and recovery solutions. The key aspects of SolarWinds MSP backup and recovery are focused around the concept of a cloud-based backup and recovery solution. So at the heart, we're not an on-premise solution. We are first and foremost a cloud solution. So first and foremost, we're going to be a cloud-based backup and recovery solution. And we're going to optimize that by delivering hybrid cloud technologies to allow you to have local recovery copies, faster buffers, optimized for the WAN through our True Delta or Delta-based backup technology, and a full complement of bidirectional data deduplication features. We store our data in 7 global data centers. These are all with security focus in mind. We've got an ISO 27001 certification, and all data that is sent to the cloud is going to utilize your private encryption keys, your choice of AES 128, 256, or Blowfish 448. So you truly own your data, even though it is residing out in a public and or private cloud. So at the core of backup and recovery solutions, if you're looking at a new solution, you've probably tried the tried and true on-premise or on-site solutions, and now you're thinking about cloud-based protection. The best way to think of cloud-based protection, think of it as electronic vaulting. It's the ability to have your backup and have it off-site without that expense or complexity of shipping those tapes. You've also probably looked at the differences between file and folder and image-based solutions. With the SolarWinds MSP backup and recovery solution, we introduce a hybrid cloud model. We believe that we check all of those boxes between the traditional file and folder and image-based solutions when it comes to ease of selection, ease of configuration, and then the advancements of recovering full systems and virtualization, bare metal recovery. We give you the benefits of off-site protection in case you lose your entire site, but we give you the performance benefits of local recovery through our local speed vault technology, which effectively maintains a local backup and restore cache that can be used to give you restore speeds at gigabit or LAN speeds versus a typical WAN recovery. And you could be talking about the difference of recovery in 5 minutes or 2 hours versus 4 hours or 24 hours, depending on the customer's type of internet connectivity. So if you think about it, a lot of organizations have implemented multiple backup and recovery solutions over time. So ideally, you've got one solution, you're using it globally, but the reality is that you've got multiple solutions on-site. There's no real easy way to consolidate those solutions. So you're looking at multiple sets of reports, you're logging into multiple consoles, looking at multiple emails to see if you've got successful daily backup and restore operations. Where SolarWinds MSP backup and recovery is a key differentiator is that we were built for the cloud. We were designed to give you a centralized single pane of glass. We're a full multi-tenant solution, so you can have that data sovereignty, that full isolation, the ability to come in from a single point, look at all of your endpoints, whether it be multiple customers, multiple sites, multiple departments, and present that with a single pane of glass, access it remotely through the firewalls without any third-party tools or remote control applications. What you're going to see from a UI perspective is a centralized management console like you see on the left here with quick, easy drill down reporting, the ability to manage by exception. You want to drill on your successes, drill on your failures, drill on your over quotas or items that are exceeding your backup window. Find exactly those systems. And then you can, with just another click, actually launch that management interface so you can drill down to find out why certain files are taking longer to back up, exclude temporary files or ISO images or dump files that maybe you don't need as part of your day-to-day backup or that you wouldn't include in your disaster recovery configurations, all of this through a simple web browser. As I mentioned, we are a secure solution, so we do encrypt the data on the local device. All data in rest, all data in motion is fully encrypted, compressed, and deduped using your provided encryption keys and selected encryption level. That way there is zero knowledge of that to anybody that has access to the cloud or that might try to intercept your data across the wire. So this is going to be as secure, if not more secure, than the encryption level you're going to drop onto a tape and then hand off to that Iron Mountain guy that takes it off site. I've talked a little bit about true hybrid recovery or hybrid data protection. What that means really is that we can recover any data that we're protecting, whether it be files, folders, databases, entire systems, back out to a physical machine or a virtual system. I can recover any device, so physical servers, physical workstations, Mac, Linux, Windows, and I can take those systems and drop them out as virtual machines in your choice of recovery target. Back to the original system, a local hypervisor, VMware, Hyper-V, flat, VHD, or ESX files, or out to, of course, the topic of today, your public cloud environments like Amazon or Azure EC2 environments. So one of the key things that was brought up very early on was the factor of trust. How do you ensure that you can trust a cloud-based backup solution? Well, first and foremost, being a hybrid solution, you have all of your data there on your local speed vault as well if you choose to enable that functionality. If you do lose your site, you've got the added benefit of having it all in the cloud through no extra effort that can be used for recovery. Our global data centers are maintaining a 5 nines availability. We allow you to do automated disaster recovery testing, what we call our continuous restore technology, which allows you to synthesize those VMs in the background, continuously restore them to an offline environment, boot them up on a regular basis, either manually or automatically, generate screenshots so that you can see you've got the proof of performance that that VM or that system is available in the event of an outage. And by taking advantage of that continuous restore technology, you can have a VM ready to boot in as little as 5 minutes following a server failure because you've proactively built it or created it in the background and updated it after each and every backup operation. From a support perspective, our support teams are available 24/7, and they're there to help prioritize both your backup and your recovery needs. The efficiency side of the house is also very key. Starting out with completeness, being able to standardize on a single tool where you can not only look at and manage all of your sites and locations, but all of your platforms have multiple recovery options. Recover the right way for the certain kind of data loss that you've suffered, whether it be a file and folder deletion, a database corruption, or a ransomware or a full site failure. So giving you multiple recovery options is as important as being able to protect multiple environments. Rapid deployment, the ability to push out the software automatically with new software distributions, new systems being stood up, new VMs being created, and be able to do that centrally and remotely without having to physically go to each location or log into each individual machine. So under the covers, how this all works, and this is going to look very, very similar. There hasn't been a lot of new advancements in backup and recovery in the last 20 years. We really just shifted the bottlenecks and simplified the management aspects of it. But how this works under the covers, you start by identifying the landscape that you want to play in, what applications and operating systems you want to protect. And from there, you simplify it so that you're looking at the same user interface, the same management interface across all layers. We're going to start by maintaining a simple mantra, if you will, a 3-2-1 backup strategy, that hybrid cloud backup strategy that I've talked about, where we always maintain at least 3 copies of your data. Maybe more if you want the virtual standby and recovery copies and instances out on Amazon or Azure. But starting with at least 3 copies of the data. That's going to be first your production copy and at least 2 backup copies. Now, those backup copies we're going to maintain on different types of storage, whether that be cloud storage, local storage, NAS, USB. You'll note that we do not offer a tape-based solution here. So the goal is to provide that true Delta technology, daily Delta backups, and never have to drop the data off to tape. But default standard 28-day retention, full archiving capability, and then customization to expand retention out as far as you need to go. Now, finally, we're always going to maintain at least 1 copy of the data off-site. If you want to maintain a second or third copy off at a secondary data center in that Amazon or Azure cloud, that's available to you as well. Now, how recovery works is, like I said, we try to give you the best of both worlds here. We give you the ability to do synthesize an image from that file and folder and system state and application level backup, the option to do bare metal recovery out to a new piece of hardware or a repaired system, but we'll also allow you to virtualize out to those VMDK or VHD files, to drop back a single database, drop back a single file, or just the files that were corrupted or encrypted by that ransomware attack. These can all be done on demand after the outage occurs, but we like to encourage proactive recovery. And that's where you deploy our software in a continuous restore mode, effectively virtualizing or continuously monitoring the backups and restoring to an offline or secondary data center so that in the event of an outage, that data is already there. Now, those VMs are not going to be running or that database is not going to be mounted, but you'll have that data there available should you need it. One of the key components that I've talked about a little bit here or alluded to a little bit is that local speed vault. That local speed vault is my local storage copy of my cloud data. Now, this is an optional component that you can enable. We encourage it with just about all of our deployments because it really simplifies recovery, speeds recovery, gives me the ability to get my data back at LAN speeds instead of WAN speeds. So gigabit or USB 3 speeds versus that traditional 10, 20, 50, 100 megabit download pipe that you might see in some regions if you don't have access to Google Fiber. Why pull the data from the cloud if you don't need to? And it's going to be secure, encrypted, and compressed on that local vault just like it would be in the cloud. And that becomes one of your redundancy copies. When you start to think about, well, why am I going to trust my data in the cloud? What happens if something happens to the cloud? This local vault is your peace of mind there as well. It allows you to retain all of your data in a highly compressed, highly deduped store. Typically, we're going to see between a 0.5 to 1% daily change rate with our True Delta backups. So what that translates to is the ability to have 28 days worth of retention plus end of months for a full year in maybe 1x to 1.2x the original selected size of your data. Because our data centers can be, in some cases, the only source for recovery, especially if you choose not to use that local speed vault, we do configure these systems for high-performance recovery. So we've got multiple 10G connections in our 7 global data centers. These are going to allow you to do high-speed restores up to the extent of your incoming internet and stream that system back as quickly as possible. It is bidirectional deduplication. This is going to mean that we never send the same data across the wire twice. This is going to aid both in backup, but it's also going to aid in restore. It means that if you've got a version of the database that you're looking to recover or a version of the system you're looking to recover, I only need to restore the changed components or the changed blocks to take you back to yesterday's image or an image from 3 days ago, a database from last week, versus restoring back, hundreds of megabytes or gigabytes of data. Now, as has been alluded to in the other presentations, you can't guarantee that you're going to have a site to recover to, or that you're going to have standby hardware, a virtual infrastructure available to you. So Amazon or Azure, or even for that matter, Hyper-V or VMware running in a private cloud can become that recovery target. And that's as simple as pointing to that target, entering your credentials, whether it be Amazon or Azure, where it will be a bring your own credential. We don't sell or resell the Amazon or Azure service. You'll enter your own login information there. We'll create the VMs, and then we'll upload those into those infrastructures. Or we'll connect to your Hyper-V and your VMware environments and directly inject those VMs into those management user interfaces. So, at a very, very high level, you've kind of seen what we've done for a re-envisioned cloud-based backup and recovery solution. A 20-minute presentation really doesn't do it justice. I would encourage you to come out to our website, solarwindsmsp.com/backup, sign up for a free 30-day trial. If you've got questions or comments around platforms, speeds, feeds and promotional pieces, we can talk to you about that as well. Reach out to our sales teams, mspbackup-sales@solarwinds.com, and we'd love to answer those questions. But I think we've got some time today for some questions as well. So I'll turn it back to you guys, and we can take it from there.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Eric, for your presentation. We do have a few questions in the queue, so why don't we spend the rest of our time taking some of those audience questions. Eric, you just finished speaking, so I'll keep you on the so-called hot seat. Your question comes from an attendee. It's actually a two-part question. A, how quickly can you recover a failed server using your solution? And B, how is your software licensed?
So how quickly we can recover is, I hate to use the term, your mileage may vary or objects are close as they appear, but how quickly you can recover is really going to matter based on how proactive you've been in establishing your SLAs. So if you get a call from a customer and they're down and you've not taken the proactive steps to build a recovery plan, you're kind of at the mercy of that customer's bandwidth. How much data can you physically move across their bandwidth in a given amount of time based on the size of their server. Now, if you get proactive, however, with our continuous restore technology, I could have a failed server up and running in as little as 5 minutes, or effectively the amount of time it takes to boot a virtual machine. And this could be a virtual machine running in the cloud, running on a private data center. So as little as 5 minutes up to the limitations of your bandwidth and your server size.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
As to the second part, how we're licensed.
Yeah.
No worries.
Yeah.
So as to how we're licensed, a lot of solutions are tied to servers and agents and options. We try to simplify that. We are a subscription-based solution, so you do pay a monthly subscription for protection, and it's tied to a per server or per workstation count. So you get access to all the technology, this local speed vault, the ability to go to the cloud or local, and you can really customize what features you want to use or deliver out to your end users, and that's going to be for a flat per server monthly fee.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. Got to watch out for. I have to be more mindful of those compound questions. Stacey from Arcserve, the next question is for you, and the attendee's question is, what is the typical RTO with instant VM and instant BMR recovery?
And that's a great question, Tim. With instant VM, I've seen, like I said before, I've seen it in my environment, my demo environment. I bring up a server in about 4 minutes, and I would think, hey, that's, good conditions and all that as well. I've actually seen customers bring them up faster, right? So obviously it depends on the size of the machine, what they have as far as infrastructure, network speeds, things like that. There's some configuration that can also affect performance of that as well. But when I say configuration, I'm talking about network configuration, the way you do that. But I'd say easily within 15 minutes you can have a machine up and running, probably a lot quicker than that, but I'd be comfortable saying within 15 minutes. Virtual standby, right, which is an instant VM, it actually has the machine created, is the time it takes to turn that machine on, right? So if you really, really need, guaranteed fast time, what we always recommend is you test, right, and you kind of see which works better for you as far as that goes. Now, the instant bare metal recovery, right? That one, you're not waiting for that machine to come completely online and be re-imaged, right? So you can access it that much, much quicker. So there's not a set number, right, that we can tie to that, but it will hands down be, available quicker than normal restore would be for you. Usually you're talking, with under 15 minutes, a lot of times under 10 minutes, and in a lot of cases under 5 minutes. So it really depends on the environment there. But great question. Thank you.
I agree, it is, Stacey. Eric, another question for you. It's kind of a long question. I'll just go ahead and read it. How is the SolarWinds MSP backup and restore service built? Is it based on data volume being replicated? And what additional costs apply for DR testing and running in your cloud?
So
does that make sense?
It does. So being a software as a service model, you license based on the systems you're protecting. Typically that's based on selected size. So if you're protecting 4 servers with an average of 300 gigs apiece, we base the model on that. Now, with that, we give you full archiving, data retention, configuration, customization, and we don't charge any more for that. We give you the tools to protect your environment. I don't sell you, so I don't have a SolarWinds cloud recovery environment. I don't offer my own public recovery cloud, but we do utilize our own private cloud for secondary storage, where we host your archived and backed up data. So when it comes time to recovery, the recovery infrastructure is your infrastructure. It could be your Hyper-V and VMware servers at a secondary data center, on-premise running in a BDR appliance, or in that public Amazon or Azure cloud, which is a bring-your-own cloud model where you would utilize your own licenses. So I don't charge you any additional for that, but you deliver or you present your own recovery environment, and we provide the tools to get the data in and out in a rapid fashion.
Thank you, Eric. Stacey from Arcserve, your next question is, do you support Zen Server?
Right, so another great question when we're talking about virtualization. So we would support Zen Server in an agent-based backup solution. So we would have an agent, and it's a single UDP agent. We don't have different agents and options and things like that. So it would be a single UDP agent, and we provide all that same functionality: virtual standby, instant virtual machine, being able to take the data up to the cloud if you need to do that, right, and be able to do that. Now, virtual standby, instant VM, those would be to VMware Hyper-V. However, we could do that, right, because we're doing it agent-based, so it would not be a problem as far as that goes. And that's what we would do in the case of, like, to Amazon, it would be to their infrastructure.
Eric, another question that's in that same vein. What virtualization platforms do you support as disaster recovery targets with SolarWinds MSP backup?
Virtualization targets, obviously we can restore back to the original systems, physical systems, but from a virtual perspective, we'll natively target your licensed or your paid VMware ESX server environments, or at least VMware Essentials or greater. Your Hyper-V Generation 2 and 3, your Server 2008 R2s up through the 2016 targets. And then Amazon and Azure public clouds. We can also just create flat or offline virtual disk files, so VMDK or VHD, VHDX files that you could then inject into the hypervisors of your choice.
Okay, cool. let's see. Looks like Stacey, in those ransomware case studies you mentioned earlier, how much data did companies lose on average? I guess this question is just asking for more context.
Absolutely. So I know that in the case of the publishing house that it was, I don't believe there's any data lost in that case, right? Because they had just performed the backup previous to that infection. So again, coming back to how frequently you're taking your backups, the value of your data, that really helped them as far as that was going. As far as that went, you didn't have, remember, it's not always about also, the data that you lose, it's the time that you take to do that recovery. Right, so that's time that systems aren't online, things like that as well. They didn't experience any of that, any hit from that, so it's fantastic. In the case of the medical one, right? I'm not quite sure. I don't think they shared that with us. I know it was minimal, right? Data loss as far as that goes, but I don't have an actual amount on that as far as that goes. I know like I said, the publisher, I know they didn't lose any data. So.
Okay.
Great question.
Yeah, I agree. The final question today is actually for each of you, but Eric, we'll start with you. Where are your data centers located, and how do you fit in with compliance with especially government clouds and government data, government-related data?
That's an interesting one. So there's so many compliance and certification things out there. So, it's impossible to certify and test and to comply to all of them. But we do utilize 7 global data centers, U.S., Canada, Australia, Germany, the Netherlands, London, and I might be missing one there. Those are ISO and PCI compliant data centers. And they've got the full ramp of security and redundancies and access controls and so on. Our solution itself is the software down to the delivery method and employee hiring and so on is also ISO 27001 certified. We, like I said, we've encrypted data at the source so that it is zero knowledge type of system. And, we work with or sign or co-sign HIPAA agreements, and we'll provide guidance on other certification standards to let you know whether, we believe we are compliant or which components of our software are compliant or maybe not be compliant with the various regulations that you may have. So the best bet is to start out by talking to our account execs to let us know your requirements, and we can try to make all those dots connect and see if it's a viable solution for you.
Mm-hmm. Good answer, Eric. How about you, Stacey? What's going on with Arcserve in that regard?
Right. So as far as the compliance, I'm going to start on that side of things first. I'm going to mirror a lot of what Eric said there as well. We do have a lot of different compliancy from PICA to HIPAA compliancy, but it's outside of that too, because HIPAA is more guidelines, things like that as well. Right. It's more to that. So it's working with them to better understand what those guidelines are and things like that. So, as far as the data centers go, I know that we have East Coast, West Coast in the U.S. We have a data center in Canada, and then we have several throughout Europe and other locations as well. So total number, I've never actually sat down and numbered them or counted them, but we do have a global presence. But then we will always try to keep the data, and we're going to be required in most cases. I know Canada is one that the data cannot leave the country, right? So same kind of thing. So we're going to, geographically locate the data in the country that you're in. And then in the U.S., it's East Coast, West Coast, as far as that goes.
All right, good deal. Thank you, everyone, for your participation today. It's time to wrap up the webcast. And with that, let me pass the proverbial baton back to Tracy to close out the event.
Great. Thank you so much, Tim. Thanks for your presentation and for moderating today's Supercast. I really appreciate it. And I'd also like to thank Stacey and Eric for their excellent presentations and also for their participation in the Q&A. And for the audience, we appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to be with us. This event was sponsored by Arcserve and SolarWinds and presented by Redmond Magazine. Thanks again, everyone, and enjoy the rest